You mentioned Gordon Tullock and James Buchanan earlier. For me, the most important thinker about the growth of the state is Manker Olson, whose
Absolutely.
book The Rise and Decline of Nations, I think, is simply fantastic. A guy named Jonathan Rauch wrote a nice kind of popularization of
Government's
Olson's
End.
book. Yeah, yeah, you
Yeah.
know the book. Yeah, so
Yeah.
you know,
Demosclerosis is the first version of it, but
okay, you know this very
fabulous.
well. Yeah, yeah, exactly. I love the book. I think it's fantastic, and it shows why so the natural course for governments is to grow without end and without regard to the public interest. The incentive structures are such that these things are always move in the direction of bigger and more, never in the direction of less. And so it's like you almost need some kind of radical exogenous force to come through to stop that process or reverse that process. I almost think of it akin to like a forest fire, right? And I live in California, so fires are always on my mind here. But if you don't have fires in forests after a while, you get this buildup of vegetable matter on the floor of the forest that eventually is going to lead to a really, really bad situation. And so we have these controlled burns where you let things burn for a little while. And if you don't do that, kind of nature comes along and takes things into his own hands. So I think of that a lot as a kind of analogy for shrinking the states. Like maybe you need some kind of forest fire, right? Maybe what it takes is like a war or a bankruptcy or something really catastrophic in order to reverse this natural tendency towards growth. I don't know. I still haven't quite made up my mind about that. But the thing that troubles me about Trump and Doge more than the randomness of the cuts is the not the non-randomness of the cuts, right? Like I think a lot a lot of what Trump has done, and maybe a lot is an understatement, but a lot of what Trump has done has been about consolidating power, or that at least is how it looks to me, that he is trying to consolidate as much power as possible in the presidency and eliminating countervailing sources of power in the government or rendering them neutered in a sense. Um, in whatever way he can. And I think a big part of what was going on in Doge was precisely that. It was targeting sources within the government that stood as some kind of independent check on Trump's authority that he wanted neutralized. And in that sense, it was a politically motivated operation. And you see this just like all the time with Trump, right? I mean, you saw like 2 days ago with John Bolton, right? Trump goes after people who take a stand against him by whatever legal or extra legal mechanisms are available to them. He goes after inspectors general. He goes after the judiciary, judges who render rulings that he don't like. This, I think, is very troubling because I think as much as I care about justice, right, in some abstract sense, like I want the state to do the things that it should do and not do the things that it shouldn't do, one of the ways in which my liberalism or my libertarianism has evolved is I've almost come to think that, maybe I have come to think that in some ways power is more important than justice, right? And what matters is not, right? Like here's a way of thinking about the distinction. What matters is not that we get somebody in government who has the right view of justice and then we put all the power in his hands so that he could do all the right things. What I think is a much more important goal is to have countervailing sources of power, right? So that power is widely dispersed throughout government, widely dispersed throughout society, so that nobody has the ability to implement their particular view of justice or whatever on everybody else. And that's why I think markets are good, right? I think markets are an incredible source of that's one of the reasons why I think markets are good. They're an incredible source of countervailing power. That's why I think the separation of powers in the federal government is important. And that's why I think that a lot of what Trump has done has been deeply worrisome. It's because it appears to be a way of attacking that dispersion of power, these countervailing powers, and concentrating powers in the hands of one person.
So I think here's where you and I probably are drinking the talking point Kool-Aid of the respective parties more than perhaps we ought to. I don't know. So I find some of the right wing critiques of the Democrats enormously persuasive in terms of the things that they did to grow government, to ensconce themselves in government, to try to achieve permanent power, to go after their political enemies. Don't think of Trump as purely a victim, but I think that the way that they went after him with lawfare was unprecedented and just trumped up proceduralism that I look at all of these cases and what they amounted to, it just seems like so much contrivance designed to keep him down and keep him from ever coming back to power, but also sort of spreading and deepening Democrat power. It's almost like they are the masters at accuse your enemy of doing what you're doing. And I am very, very dubious about. I think the Republicans are hypocrites, and they have no principles. They're interested in growing government and their interests, just like the Democrats are. So a pox on both their houses in this regard. But the kind of evil, dirty tricks to which they were willing to go in the Biden administration, the kind of spending and just across the board erecting the administrative state that the Democrats have done has been just unspeakable, honestly. And maybe I overstate that, and maybe between our two perspectives about Trump and what they're doing now, I actually see the Biden administration and the administrative state, the way it behaved, as being far more dangerous than what are kind of muscular and perhaps constitutionally dubious actions on the part of Trump. I don't think that they are worse in severity or scale than what came before it. Not at all. Now, I would acknowledge that that's not a good thing, that what we have created are mechanisms for partisan tit for tat as things change over, that the pendulum swing starts to come with degrees of authoritarianism, whether it's from a Politburo or a narcissistic king type. It doesn't matter. That what this always does is leave behind the residue of authoritarian means, the coercive machinations of the state to bring people to heel, to sap them of resources, to regulate them, to over police them, and so on. I share those concerns, but I don't agree about. I think you and I probably don't agree about which party or which person is worse. That being said, you wrote in your article that it was that it's something to the effect that it's not good that you're only rolling back the state when it comes to the Democrats' pet projects, but not the Republicans' pet projects. And that is absolutely true. I think that's a problem, and I think that is happening. But if you said to me, and this is the metaphor I used, and I just want to get your reaction to it, that Max, you're covered in ticks and leeches. We call one set Democrats, the other Republicans. And I pick the ticks off of you and leave the leeches. Why should I find that objectionable? It seems like in your mind, we should just leave both on the voter rather than picking off one set of parasites and not the other. Is that why leave both in place? Why have an egalitarian view? We know that they're going to act like partisans. So can we just call that a partial win? Why not? Why leave it all in place?
Yeah, so I don't know what I would say about the ticks and leeches bit, but in that specific example, but I see what you're getting at. And I think the difference, if there's a difference here, is that I think that there is a important and independent norm of equal treatment that should govern what the government does. In addition, independent of and in addition to whatever standards of justice you might have, right? So, and again, I think this is something that to some extent is I would call it a libertarian blind spot. More diplomatically, you might say something that libertarians haven't maybe talked as much about as they should. But like the libertarians are great, again, about saying like what rights people have, right? Like, these are the things the government can do to people. These are the things the government can't do to people. They don't talk quite so much about this idea of equal treatment, which I see as kind of part and parcel of a broader commitment to the rule of law, um, right? Equality under the law. But I think that there would be something objectionable, for instance, in a unjust law being imposed upon, say, half the population, um, and not on the other half. Like, not that exactly that it would be better, all things considered, if the unjust law was imposed on everybody, but I think the inequality there is a source of concern in and of itself. And let me just give you an example that I think is, to my mind, quite compelling in this respect, right? So imagine you think that there shouldn't be any such thing as public schools, right? You're a principled anarchist. You think that education ought to be provided on the free market. The government ought to have nothing to do with it. Okay, fine. Even if that's right, I think it would be really, really objectionable if the government had public schools and only gave access to them to like white people, right? Or Christians or whatever. Or that like Christians and white people got like one quality of school and like other people got, a much worse quality of school. It's not like there's more injustice taking place. It's that there's if the government's going to be doing something, it ought to do it in a way that treats people equally in the relevant respect. And equality is kind of a complicated moral notion, but I think like in the case of like school segregation or something along those lines, that would be a very clear and objectionable violation of equal treatment.
Yeah, I mean, I think I think I understand what you mean, and I certainly agree with that conception of equal treatment under the broader concept of rule of law.